Thank you, Merle. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. For those that don't know me, I am Steve Drazkowski. I live on the Zeppa. I represent House District 1, which includes the southern portions of Goodhue, Wabasha County, and northern portion of Winona County, and just a smidgen of Dodge County. We're here tonight to talk about an issue that has really erupted in the conscience of Minnesotans over the last 2 weeks. And I know I've heard from two constituents again today, and I seem to hear from them daily now about the consequences that MNsure is placing upon their lives and how they try to navigate the future. And just quickly a little bit, and I'm going to introduce my colleague who knows much more about this topic than I do. But we had in Minnesota arguably the nation-leading health insurance, health care relationship of any state in the country. 94% of Minnesotans had health insurance coverage before the thing called MNsure was brought forward and rammed through by one-party control back in 2013. Similar to what happened with Obamacare on the federal level, in Minnesota here too, the Minnesota form of Obamacare, the Minnesota implementation of Obamacare, was rammed through without any minority party support. And I was in the minority party at the time. I remember very clearly the discussion as we tried to offer some common sense amendments to the proposal that was going through at the time and eventually became law and what we have here today. But we weren't able to offer accountability controls for this MNsure standalone state agency as it became. We weren't able to implement some of the administrative rule requirements that needed to be made. We weren't able to require that the MNsure board and some of the people that were involved with MNsure were people who actually knew about healthcare. Some of those things that were really common sense were not accepted. And so we have what we have here today, and what we're here to do is three things. We want to hear from you about your experiences and what your life situation is like right now in the face of the insurance rates that we have recently heard about being brought forward. Secondly, we'd like to hear about any questions you might have that we might be able to answer or that we can take with us and find the answers hopefully for you. And then lastly, if you have any ideas as we go forward, and obviously it's a very complicated area. Not a lot of us have the type of depth that Representative Dean and maybe some others do in this area. But if you have some ideas, we want to take those along with us as well. Quickly, some ground rules. We are going to go with a presentation here for about no more than a half hour. And then we're hopeful that within about 45 minutes or an hour after that, about 8:15 or 8:30, we can adjourn. So that's what we're looking for. So we'll have about 45 minutes at the most, an hour of discussion after we have kind of the introductory portion of the program. We ask that people don't interrupt others. It can be a very emotional topic for people, and so respect each other in the room and differing opinions is very important. We've also got a couple of things. Merle, are you going to be taking the clipboard around?
It should be circulating right now.
Okay, if you have questions or if you'd like to speak when we get to the discussion portion, whether it's discussion about your experiences, questions, or ideas, or all three of them, please sign in on the clipboard, because that's what we're going to go use that as our guide as we go through that discussion period. And lastly, if you don't get a chance to talk tonight, or you've got something you would like to say or have us research as we go forward, Merle has some half sheets of paper here that are properly formatted to take that input and question from you. We can take it back with us. We can do the research necessary and do what we can to try to find answers to your question, and certainly catalog your ideas that you might have as we go forward that might not otherwise be captured. So that's where we're at with that. We do have some other folks joining us here tonight too that we'll introduce. I see Barb Haley stepped in the door, and she's a candidate for Minnesota House of Representatives here in 21A. Thank you, Barb, and I hope to maybe hear from her a little bit later as well. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you an esteemed colleague and a very good friend of mine, Representative Matt Dean. Representative Dean is the chair of the House Health and Human Services Finance Committee in the House, the committee that overlooks the area of health care, including a lot of the details around MNsure. Of course, realize that Representative Dean obtained his gavel after MNsure was already developed, and is trying to help us navigate forward as we try to improve upon what we have, or maybe look for different paths into the future. So with that, Representative Dean will have a presentation here today, and then we'll proceed into the discussion session.
Thanks, Draz. And I hope you all realize just how well you're represented by Steve Drazkowski. He does such a fantastic job, and no one works harder for their constituents than Representative Drazkowski does. Does an excellent job, and we're very fortunate to have him. My friend of mine I was talking to this morning, and I said I was driving down to Red Wing, and she says, well, you got to get your wife the new Red Wing boots. There's the Heritage Collection. And I said, well, that sounds good. I'll go over there and get them. So I did purchase a pair of Red Wing boots today, and I didn't know they were that expensive. I did commit to buying them before I knew what the cost was, which is, it's a price we all pay sometimes in government, and we're going to talk about that a little bit with what we're talking about right now. I just want to hear from folks here. This is a very, very tough topic right now, because in Minnesota, this is hitting middle-class Minnesota in the ribs hard. And the deal that was put on the table and approved that is going to be enacted in 2017 is unacceptable. It provides not enough choice. It provides unacceptable cost and unacceptably little access for people across the state of Minnesota. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about where it came from, what it is, why it's here, and where we might go from here. But more importantly, we want to hear from you folks, because this is what we can actually take back, the stories from folks that we can actually take back to make a difference. If we can say that actually this is a big deal, because from what we hear on the other side, hey, this is only 5%. 95% of the people this doesn't impact at all. That actually things are much better now than they were before, and that things are getting better every month. And I don't have to tell you that that's not the truth, because you can go home and see with your own eyes what's in your mailbox, what's on your family budget, and what's on your plan for the year ahead. I can tell you that in Minnesota, we are very fortunate to have some of the best doctors, hospitals, technicians, researchers in the world. And that didn't come from nowhere. It came from somewhere. And 100 years ago when we built the Capitol, it was really a shiny example of where we want to go and where we had come. We kind of arrived on the prairie. This is who we were. We had accumulated wealth from harvesting stuff, timber, agriculture, and minerals, from building stuff, and from healing people. We had accumulated wealth. And when it comes to the healing people part, we are really in the soup right now, because we have set up a way, we had a Minnesota way that led the nation, and now we're kind of creeping backwards into an area that we can't afford, and that is not going to be good for the future of the state of Minnesota. And when we talk about Obamacare, and MNsure in Minnesota, it's politically charged. Okay, there's a political reality to it. And you can't get away from that because it was created, delivered, and paid for as a political object. But if you live at home, and this is your life, and this is your health, and this is your kids' health, it's not political. It's real life. And that is the pressure point that we're at right now. And my wife happened to be down in Chicago a few years ago when President Obama, he had recently elected, recently won his Nobel Peace Prize. He was presenting Obamacare for the first time in a long speech to the delegates to the American Medical Association. And my wife was an alternate delegate, so she was there. And there was doctors from all over the world who had come to America to study medicine, to learn medicine in the state of in the United States. And what President Obama said about medicine in the United States was really something. He said, almost 50% more, we spend almost 50% more per person than the next most costly nation. And I think many of you are aware that for all this spending, more of our citizens are uninsured and the quality of our health care is lower and we aren't healthier. In fact, citizens in other countries spend substantially less than we do and they live longer and do better. That's what he said to the best doctors in the country. Now, a lot of them kind of looked at him funny, as they should have. Because they came to the United States because it has the best health care in the country. And he should have known that because he had a Nobel Prize at that time. He was 48 years old when he made that speech. In his lifetime of those 48 years, 37 of the 48 years, the Nobel Prize in Medicine went to an American. And here he was talking about how great it is in other countries. And then he said this. So let me begin by saying this to you and to the American people. I know there are Americans, millions of Americans, who are content with the health care coverage they have, and they like their plan, and most importantly, they value the relationship with their doctor, and they trust you. And that means that no matter how we reform health care, we will keep this promise to the American people. If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor, period. And if you like your health care plan, you will be able to keep your health care plan, period. No one will take it away, no matter what. That is my view of healthcare reform, and that is my pledge. So that was the promise, where we were going. I can tell you that that is not what has been delivered. And in Minnesota, we have had this visited upon us with MNsure in Minnesota. So Governor Dayton, he was elected in 2010. His first act as governor was to expand Medicaid. He had a choice to expand it or not expand it. He decided to expand it. So then he expanded Medicaid to 138% of the federal poverty guideline. We instituted Minnesota Care from 138 to 200%. And we kept our 2% sick tax, which is supposed to go away, which gathers up about $600 million a year. Now, currently moving forward, you're supposed to be able to go on, if you're middle class, you're supposed to be able to go on the exchange, shop for a health care policy, and be able to shop and compare and buy it, right? But if you're in middle class Minnesota, you go on the health care exchange, in 55 counties, you get one choice. And most people are telling me they can't afford it. Maybe last year it was $750, now it's going to be $1,400 a month. The deductibles, maybe before were $3,000, now they're $12,000. So if you're making $26,000, or you're making 26 bucks an hour, you can't spend 13 bucks an hour on healthcare. It doesn't work. And some folks will be lucky to get that. Okay. Also, we've had trouble with access, where the networks that if you're on an individual plan, if you got a letter from the state saying you no longer have a policy, you can go on the exchange and you can try to get one of these policies. In many counties, you will only have one choice, or if you have two, there might be 7,000 slots for the whole state that will probably close almost immediately. So you'll be stuck into a very high cost network that may not involve your hospital. So you might have to drive by one hospital, drive by another hospital to get to the hospital that's in your network. Your doctor might be the doctor you used to have. You might drive by that doctor. Then you drive by the doctor you had to get rid of 3 years ago to get to the doctor in your network, maybe 60 miles away. And you might have a hospital that's in the network, but the lab next door is out of the network, so you have to drive 60 miles to get your tests after you drive 60 miles to get to the hospital. So that's what's on the table, and it's not going to work. So that's why the governor is, doing what he's doing right now, because he knows that this is not going to work for next year. So for most people, they just wanted the plan they had. They wanted to be able to afford the plan they had. And when they talk about people in middle-class Minnesota, they talk about people on the individual health market exchange. They're talking about small business owners, farmers, shopkeepers, independent contractors. But this market affects all the prices. So this spike will drive up the costs in the small group, and it will also drive up the costs in the public programs because they're all, in a sense, they're provided by the same folks. So that's really what we're struggling with right now. The individual market, it's 250,000 people, okay? They'll say, that's not that many people. That's the population of Rochester, the population of St. Cloud, and the population of Duluth combined. So if you can imagine every house in those 3 cities underwater, that's where we're at right now. Every person, 250,000. And they don't have issues. We got 5 counties between St. Cloud and Brainerd, 5 counties, where we're going to have the situation where once they reach their caps, once they run out of policies, there's no more policies to get. So they're out of luck. So when you say it's illegal to not have health insurance, they're literally going to be put in a position where there's no health insurance to buy. And that's not maybe what might happen 20 years down the road. That's going to happen this winter. So that's part of the problem that we are trying to address and part of the urgency that we want to bring forward. And when we really talk about the middle-class Minnesota and who these people are, this is who I want you to think about. His name is Charlie Dunker. And he called me the day after I put in the bill to kill Minsure. So if we could maybe dim the lights and hear Charlie's story. It just takes 4 minutes.
Middle-class Minnesota has been thrown onto a $300 million broken website for healthcare. Most pay more and get, while others cheat to get it for free. Minsure is making things worse, and it's hurting people. Let's chop Minsure.
My wife, Gail, was the kind of person who loved everybody, and it was unconditional. We have 3 children, Brittany, Taylor, and Sam. They were definitely the pride and joy of her life. That was her world. Gail was the best mom ever. When we started this landscape business, I mean, she would work sun up to sundown. That was Gail. There was just no quit. I loved going to work with her. We did. We liked what we were doing. We had a good thing going. Gail was a cancer survivor. She got breast cancer in 2007, but they got it early. She really came through it real well. We weathered the storm, but the biggest problem was our insurances kept going up every year until it had gotten to the point where I believe we're at about $1,200 a month with an $8,000 deductible. And we didn't have a choice. You had to have it because Gail had cancer, so nobody else would take her. Minsure came along. This was our savior. It was a no-brainer. In these rough years we've had, our income was down, so it was like, we're going to qualify for all this. This is gonna save us. Well, that wasn't what happened. I can literally say in one hand we had a piece of paper saying, you're covered, you have insurance. We have this in writing. And when we try to use that insurance, insurance telling us you should have never gotten that letter because you don't have insurance. The paperwork they sent us meant nothing. Day after day for months, Gail fought with Minsure, would call them, talk to them. You talk to a different person every time. One thing Gail said, she said, I can tell this comes from the top because every person that you talk to tells you the exact same thing. The exact same thing happens. Nothing. Gail just started getting sicker. You know, I could tell when she wouldn't be getting out of bed in the morning when she normally would. She didn't feel good. One day Gail can't breathe and she just collapsed. She couldn't walk. I called 911. The ambulance came and then they hauled her to the emergency room and they gave her all the tests we'd been trying to get for months. Her lungs were full of cancer, bones were full of cancer, there was cancer everywhere. There was no trouble seeing it now. We were told this was a very treatable cancer if we'd have just gotten to a doctor earlier, which we had tried. Well, we were fighting with Minsure. The cancer spread. Nobody will help you when you're sick like that. They were going to let her die. The time we spent fighting Minsure should have been the time we were fighting Gail's cancer. Minsure did not give her a chance to do it. Minsure killed Gail Dunker. She would be here today, there isn't a doubt in my mind, if it hadn't been for Minsure. Nothing has changed, and nobody's been held accountable for anything. They all just walk away and go, sorry. You know how many times I've been told, God, we're sorry about that. I'm sick of hearing sorry. Doesn't mean a damn thing anymore. There is no justice for Gail. It's too late. I just don't want what happened to Gail to happen to anybody else, to another family. I talk to her every day. There's everything around us, our business, our house. It was all what we built together. It's different now.
All right, thanks. That was Charlie. Charlie called me the day after I introduced the bill to get rid of Minsure. And he said, this is my story. And he kind of shared his story about that. So when you hear about all the glitches and the computer problems and all of the things that people struggle with, those are real. Those are real people. And so I always tie it back to real stories like Charlie's, because it can really make a big difference. This isn't a computer problem or a glitch or something that is a bump. This is a real problem. The issues with the technology have not gotten better. They've in fact gone backwards. So when this is not just a problem of money, which it is, $220 million went out the door in Minsure over a 5-month period, signing people up for programs they didn't qualify for. We're now up to $400 million in the website. The Jonathan Gruber, the guy who estimated how much we would be able to bill out for this, assumed that we'd have 600,000 people on the plans between the business plans and the individuals. We have around 60, so that's about 90% off. So we are currently subsidizing this to keep it afloat, which we're not supposed to do. So I can't justify that anymore. I can't, the expense, I can't justify the waste, and I can't justify the unfairness that people who've lived in Minnesota their whole lives, paid the bills, lived by the rules, and are spending $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year after taxes, when other people are cheating the system and getting it for free, wasting the money because of that. Even if it was not a waste of money, it's still hurting people like Charlie and people all across the state, and maybe some folks in here too. So that's why we feel like we need to get rid of this thing. So I have a very complicated plan to deal with MNsure. It's very, very complicated. So you got to follow along very close. Okay? It's 2 steps. Step 1 is to kill it, and step 2 is to bury it. Okay? That's my complicated plan for dealing with this program. And you could say, well, you know, that's not really nuanced. You know, it sounds like it's kind of negative. Well, other states like Oregon had it. They had the same program we did. They went $200 million in. It didn't work. They couldn't get it off the ground. The government came in. They said, this doesn't work. We need to get rid of it. Hawaii came in. Same program. IBM Curum came in. Didn't work. Went in. Pulled it out. Doesn't work. The states that do have IBM Curum, it is not working in any example that we can find across the country. They are either getting rid of it or they already have gotten rid of it and moving away from it. We continue to double down and jump in further. We had the most to lose by going onto this program, and we should have been the last state in, not the first. We were the highest quality in the country, and we were among the lowest cost in the country, and we had no business jumping into this thing. And we need to just admit that we made a mistake and reverse track. And that's something that's hard for a lot of people to do. But in the other states that have done that, their people have said, we understand, everybody makes mistakes. You made a mistake, thank you for at least acknowledging that and moving forward. We need to do that because people are getting hurt. On the other side, there's people who really believe that this is something that needs to happen, that they just cannot see the writing on the wall that this is not working and getting worse. And actually, they were in the news the other day. They were sending out voter registration cards. So we've got a backlog of 88,000 that folks that need to get checked for their eligibility. We can't send out bills or receive money right now through the premium system. Because the computer system doesn't work. So if you call, you might say, they might get an answer that says, just write a check for what you think you owe and send it in. So they're unable to send out bills and receive money. And so that's where the system is at. If you work for the county and you're trying to deal with folks to try to get them services, you can call in and you can ask one question at a time, and you might be on hold for an hour to get your one question asked, then you have to hang up and then call back and get another question answered. And if this were done by an insurance company, people would be in jail. They would not be able to continue to operate. But because it's the government, there's no accountability, and that's what we need to do. So on the other side, this is my counterpart, Representative Liebling, some of you might know from Rochester, and she's going to talk about choice here. And the goal of MNsure was to have Obamacare is to have 5 choices for health insurance. And as I said, much of the state only had 1 choice. But even with the choices that are there, Representative Liebling would like to have the government make those choices for you because it's hard. And here she compares shopping for insurance to buying soup. So let's have the clip.
Clear that just having an endless number of choices is not necessarily a real choice. And the example I like to use is I go to the store to buy a can of soup. If there are 30 brands, I may walk out without any soup because it's real. And I've done that. I mean, it's hard. When you have too many choices, it means that your opportunity cost in trying to figure out what the differences is very, very high. So we want to make sure that the people that understand and can look at the various aspects of products and the values and the costs and so on, and can give consumers meaningful choices. so that they can actually go on the exchange, maybe with some help, maybe not, and make a decision and get the coverage that they need, and not walk away without any soup, as it were.
Excuse me, Madam Chair. The analogy of going in a grocery store and looking for a can of soup. If I go into a grocery store and I'm looking for a can of soup, I very likely will not walk out of the grocery store without a can of soup because I'm hungry. The grocery store attendant, that's where the owner is entrepreneurial. He's going to provide me with choices because I might not want a certain flavor. I might want this flavor. And so to my point of even though those people that are inside the exchange, to limit the choices that are available within, I think does a disservice to the intelligence and the intellect and the consumerism of those people that are going to be in it. So I'll just say that.
Well, Representative Albright, we're stretching the analogy a little bit here, but I didn't talk about different flavors. I talked about the same brand, different brands of the same flavor. So, I think that there are some choices that are meaningful. Basically, my basic point is there are meaningful choices and there are choices that really aren't meaningful. And we want to have choices that are meaningful so that consumers will be able to make a choice and make a choice that's really in their interest and feel good about their choice and have it be a choice that ultimately works for them. And if we simply have a website where just anything goes and you have to flip a coin to figure out why you should pick this one over that one, I'm not sure that we're well served. But I think we're way off the amendment actually, which really doesn't address that.
So that's buying soup. And wouldn't it be great to have any choices for folks out there right now at any price? But there's going to be people with one choice where it might be $2,000 a month after taxes or more, or $1,500 a month, and then maybe a $20,000 deductible. So we're really putting middle-class Minnesota into a position where it's like making them buy another house. You can't do it. It doesn't work. And then we're saying that even if you did get that, you can't go to your doctor, you can't go to the hospital you used to go to. You have to drive 60, 70, 80 miles away to get your tests and to see your doctor. It doesn't work. So it's treating middle-class Minnesota like second-class Minnesota. And it's not right, and this should not have been certified in the first place. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to address 2017. What can we do? What can be done for this? This was known about in the summer. The insurance companies knew that this was going to happen. The administration delayed the announcement of the rates until October. So we really have almost no time between November 1st and open enrollment for this thing to work. So we're trying to figure out what can we do to help people for 2017. And then looking forward, we have to say, what can we do long-term to return choice for Minnesotans so they can buy products that actually work for them, so they can see their doctor while their doctor's still here, so they can go to the hospital that's in their town, so that we can keep our communities together. And we have to get rid of MNsure and replace that with something that actually works. And there's basically a couple steps to it. The first step would be to divide the public plans and the private plans so that the county caseworkers who do great work can help the families and do what they need to do for low-income health care, for child care, for assistance. And they don't have to deal with people on private health insurance trying to get a tax incentive. So we want to separate that. And by the same token, the insurance agents who provide a very vital role, instead of writing them out of existence, to try to re-empower them so that they can help people again and provide the safety and peace of mind that insurance agents actually are able to provide to people. So we want to be able to do that. We have to divide that. So the insurance agents don't have to do the county's job. The county folks don't have to do the insurance people's job. We want to divide that. And then we also want to make sure that we have a pool that's big enough. So currently we have 3 programs in Minnesota. We've got Medicaid, Minnesota Care, and qualified health plans that receive tax benefits. In 49 other states, they only have 2 plans. We looked at combining the pools in Minnesota Care and the individual market in order to more than double the size of the pool and bring down those costs so that we can keep care close to home and bring the costs down. That was one of the ideas that we put forward. The governor was not willing to look at that as an option. We think that we're going to have to look at that as an option moving forward. Another option would be to bring in plans that do not have all of the mandates that we currently have, because there are too many mandates in Minnesota. That's what makes it more expensive than in other states. So that we have all these mandates that have to provide all these services, it drives up the cost for everybody. So our young people who don't get sick and go to the doctor are saying, well, I'm just going to go without insurance and pay the penalty. So they're going to pull themselves out of the market and make it even, make the spiral quicker. So we want to make them re-engage and bring them back into the market. And we want to make sure that employers who want to pay for health insurance for their employees aren't going to get forced into a position where they have to dump their employees out. The governor, moving into 17, is going to want to scoop up the individual market and put it into Minnesota Care. That will expand the public program to, engage that 250,000 plus. And then it will provide incentives for small businesses. They'll say, well, why am I providing health insurance? I'm just going to dump that, pay the fine, my employees can go into that pool, and that will pull it down even faster. So as quickly as you saw the individual markets spiral out of control, you could see the small group market spiral out of control next year. That's the below 50 employees. So that's something that we could see coming up next year. And if that happens, then she's all going downhill pretty quick. The more people that we put on Minnesota Care, the reimbursement rates go down for hospitals and doctors. So if you're in a small hospital, your reimbursement rates will go down. So if you're on the edge right now, and you go from maybe 50% public program to 80% public programs, the doors of that hospital are not going to be able to stay open. We're going to lose smaller hospitals around the state. So that's something that we don't want to have happen. We want to try to stabilize the market. But we got to bring some reality to the situation really quickly in order to save this thing. And we may have to provide help for people in 2017 with what we have. But I'm also looking at what, because the rates are set, we're sort of painted into this corner where they say the rates are set and the products are set for 2017. I want to challenge that a little bit and say, what about adding additional products to that market? Also looking at the fact that we're giving lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of money to the federal government every year, and we are not seeing that return back dollar for our health care. And if middle class Minnesota is getting kicked in the ribs like this, maybe that inequitable relationship needs to change with how much money we're giving the federal government. So those are three of the possible solutions moving forward. But we want to hear from you folks about questions that you might have about that. And some people don't like to talk in front of a group, but if you just copy down my name, Matt Dean, and you Google it, and you go to mattdean.org, you can email me a question, and I promise I'll get back to you, even though you're not in my district. But we do need to address this very quickly. And I can tell you that the political finger pointing on this issue is not going over real well. So if people think that this is a cool political fight, that is not working real well. Because I've been traveling around the state a lot this summer, and people are looking for some real solutions and leadership on this issue. So with that, thanks, and we'll open it up.
Our first question is from Jerry Struce. Jerry, do you want to hold on the microphone?
Nobody's ever put it out in the public how much each policy is taxed, or regardless of where it starts, the federal and state taxes. Do you have that figure?
Right now, the MNsure has a 3.5% tax right off the top for all of the plans that participate in the exchange. And out of the exchange is a 3.5% tax right off the top. Then on top of that, we have a 2% provider tax, so that's 5.5%, just state tax that goes across the top. And then we have assessments through our systems that have to go back and forth to the federal government that's kind of this money exchange back and forth with Medicaid and Medicare. So the answer to that is much higher, and I don't know the exact answer, but I can find out and get it for you. It would depend on whether you were in Medicaid, Medicare, an individual policy, or a subsidized policy. It would differ a little bit.
I heard through insurance, the federal tax is about 23%.
All told?
No, that's just federal part. The state has none.
Okay.
So that's
Okay,
part of the
Rick.
reason it's getting outrageous too.
Rick Voges, ready, Rick? I'll read your question for you, and if I need interpretation, I'll come over there. What's the maximum income for a family of 4 where they get a subsidy, and how much does it cover of their premium?
Sure. So that's on MNsure. So if you're a family of 4, I believe it's about $95,000 you get some subsidy. I have 3 kids, so I'm a family of 5, and ours, I could make up to $112,000, I believe, is the subsidy for 5. And that's based on the federal poverty guidelines. So it's if you're under 200% of the federal poverty guideline here in Minnesota here, and 200 to 400, it's a sliding scale for what you pay for your health insurance. So on the lower end of that, you get basically a bonus from the federal government, and then on top of that, you get cost sharing. So it's a sliding scale for how much money you make. The more you make, the less subsidy you get. But that's the limit for up to a family of 4. And so one of the disincentives that has, if you're making 200% of the federal poverty guidelines, so if you're a mom with a kid, you're making $20-some thousand a year, and you think, I'm going to get a raise at work. That's great. I'm going to get a raise. If that pushes you over 200%, it kind of pushes you off a cliff. So if you can't get a $7 an hour raise at that point, it's not worth it to get a raise. So people work less, and that provides disincentives. So people are working less, getting divorced, or making changes, or being untruthful when they're trying to work out.
So the rhetorical question is, how's that helping our economy? Liz Rickard.
Marriage is worth it, though. Hang in.
Liz will be right back.
I didn't write a question, but I thought of one in the last 5 minutes. Why didn't Minnesota go with federal exchange right up front? Like, why did we start our own?
It was discussed at the time, and it was thought that we know how to do things better here in Minnesota. We'll be able to figure it out better. Our women are stronger, our children are above average. We can do this better. And there was some of that, and it didn't work out. There was some fear about, like turning something over to the federal government, when in fact what that is, healthcare.gov is just a way for people to check their annual income for the federal IRS that connects that. So you have to do that whether you have a state exchange or not. So my question was, Wisconsin doesn't have this, we do. What if I lived in Hudson? What would I do? So I went on the computer and I signed up as a Hudson resident, and I shopped. And then I said, well, what if I was a Wisconsin resident? And then I did that. And the interface is easier. So from a consumer standpoint, you just pay less and you don't have to deal with hassle. So it's like an unnecessary evil you have to deal with. So that's something I think is an easy answer to get rid of it and to try to move forward.
Just to add there, I think Representative Dean mentioned earlier, it's up to 400 million now that we've dumped into this website that still doesn't work. I'm chair of the Property Tax Committee. Representative Anderson, Sarah Anderson, put a bill together last year, not to actually particularly get it passed, but to find out what the fiscal impact was. And what the bill did is that it said we were realizing that Goodhue County, Wabasha County, and the rest of the counties were picking up the pieces for this website not working, so they had to hire staff in order to, as the representative pointed out, plug the information into the computer and make it work from the county end. Many functions that MNsure should have been doing. But what she wrote in the bill was, what is the fiscal impact of that? In other words, she wrote a bill to reimburse the counties for their expenses for all of that time. And so we had to do something called it. And it took up until, she asked for it back in February or March, something like that. It took up until about a month ago. She finally heard back, and it was over $8 million throughout the state of Minnesota that counties were paying additional in order to pick up the additional work that MNsure wasn't doing. So it's in addition to the other taxes that were mentioned, your property taxes are impacted substantially by MNsure as well.
And just in Hennepin County alone, they've had to hire 90 people to just fill out paperwork. So this is supposed to make it easy. You sign up online at home. What actually happens is people show up to a navigator or at the county. They fill out a paper application. That gets scanned. The county worker then looks at it on their computer. They type it in to the MNsure system. They send it to MNsure. It's printed out again and typed in again at MNsure. So it's filled out by hand once and by computer twice before it's uploaded. And then you wonder why all of the problems are with trying to get glitches figured out. So the counties are begging us to be able to go back to what they were doing before. And they are saints. These people who work at the county caseworkers are nice people that just want to help people. And they have to really, they're strained because they can't do their job because they're dealing with paperwork all day. And it's a big problem. And our solution has to have them at the center of the wheel for a public policy. Because 5 years ago, they were helping families in trouble. 10 years from now, they're going to be helping the same families and struggling around in particularly small counties in the state. So we have to make sure that they are part of the solution. But we can't do that if they're strapped with what used to be the private health insurance market dumped on their desk every day.
Okay, Lyle Schumann's got a question. What percentage of the 20 million people who are able to get insured by the ACA actually wanted to be insured in the first place? Is that?
Yep.
There he is.
And I just threw it, I know it's kind of bizarre. Every time you get into a discussion of politics, wrong over on the Democratic side, and including the Obama administration and the current. They're one of their big reward points is that, we have another 20 million people in this country that are now insured. And I guess my question has always been that nobody can seem to answer, and I don't expect an answer, but how many people really wanted to get insured? Like you mentioned before, how many are still saying, I'll just take the penalty now that it's a law? But how many people really don't want to be insured versus the people that want to be insured, should be insured, and are willing to pay the cost, but now are facing what we're talking about?
Yeah.
One thing I'll mention, answer that, but again, before our nation-leading health system was blown out of the water by MNsure and the Unaffordable Care Act here in Minnesota, we were at 93 or 94% covered, right? Okay, so you add on to that about 2 or 3%, I can't remember the number, 2 or 3% of people who would never want to be insured because they have enough money they don't need to. Okay, so where are you at then? You're above 95%. You got a couple percent that are illegal aliens that can't legally be insured here, right? So you're at 97%. And then there was one other category. We were virtually 100% insured before this.
Why don't we go back to it? If it wasn't built before, why isn't it just that simple? Why can't we go back to the way it was?
Because of the Unaffordable Care Act.
Right, and to answer the question, and not everybody in here is Republican, so I understand that. There's Democrats here, there's people that are just trying to figure out what they're going to do next year. So I don't want to tailor my comments towards strictly a partisan or Republican crowd. I assume that everybody's from wherever on the political spectrum. But as Representative Drazkowski correctly points out, in Minnesota we were at under 7% uninsured. And of that, more than half qualified for a program. In other words, if they showed up to the county hospital, they would be treated and immediately paid for without deductible premium or copay. So we had a very small sliver in Minnesota, and today, middle-class Minnesota has $1,500 a month premiums, huge deductibles before you get the first penny of health care. So we don't have, for middle-class Minnesota on an individual policy, you don't have health insurance, you have bankruptcy insurance. And that's not okay. And the answer is, how many people would take the insurance policy they had 8 years ago today? Yeah. And how many people would be willing to pay more for it if we could just go back to what we had before? And that's where I think the states have to step up and say, we're not going to do this anymore. The way that we did it in the mid-90s with welfare reform, we got to say, Minnesota knows, we may not know how to do everything well. We got healthcare figured out pretty good. We're gonna need to do this on our own and cut a different deal with the federal government, because otherwise we can't afford to do what we're doing right now. If you come from another state or another country and you just say, I'm under 200% of the federal poverty guideline and I intend to live in the state of Minnesota, you get free health care on day one wherever you want without premium, deductible, or copay. If you've lived here your whole life, you paid your bills, you paid your taxes, you get a health insurance policy, you get cancer, you want to go to the University of Minnesota or Mayo, you're out of network. You're out of luck. So that's part of the issue that we just have to cut a different deal.
Okay, the next question deals, so I'll just read it and then Representative Dean can provide the answer. Marty Karen says, my premium is going to $2,030 a month. Last year was $1,165 with a $6,400 deductible. Why are premiums about 30% cheaper in Dakota County than in Goodhue County? And at one point I think it was actually the differential was greater than that.
Yeah, so that's a $24,000 a year premium, and with the deductible, it's over $30,000 after taxes in this instance. $30,000 after you pay taxes on $30,000 to be able to afford an insurance policy, and that's before you get your first penny of insurance. That's what you have to pay. And in southeast Minnesota, we've got the Mayo Clinic that is a great provider of health care, but it's oftentimes where people from other parts of the state, other parts of the country, and indeed other parts of the world come when they have something that's really bad, or really rare, or really expensive. So Mayo's often not the first place you go, but the fifth place you go if you have something bad. And I thank God that we have people who are there and who can do those miracles. My wife went to medical school there. It's an unbelievable place, and I want every single person in the state of Minnesota to have a path to Mayo if they need it. But currently we don't. But what that does is it makes it more expensive in the southeast, so the costs look higher, even though they don't provide worse care, they provide better care. The costs look higher, so they're in a different pool than the rest of the state, so that's what makes it more expensive, and it makes it unfair for southeast Minnesota. And that's something we need to change.
So who dreamed up that rule? Like that?
The regulators, the Commerce Department, and regulators.
Okay, Ann Buck, Ann, do you want to comment at all with yours? Ann just basically says, how do we stop it? What is the most effective way to stopping it? First of all, we need an election. That will help immensely. But I think that's the obvious thing. We're gonna have to find out. This election is going to tell us immensely, both at the federal, especially at the federal, and also at the state level, what the future holds for these very questions.
And I can just tell you, just to as a partisan note, this is a partisan thing. This came as a political document. This is basically the board of MNsure prevents doctors and insurance people from being on the board. So if you're going to take over the healthcare and health insurance market of the whole state, and you prevent doctors and you prevent people from the insurance industry, and It's dreamed up by people with political science degrees, and it's manned by people from labor unions and special interest groups. What do you think it's going to look like? We need to get rid of that. And so that's why I'm not wishy-washy about the need to get rid of that thing. The other piece of that is that if I get defeated in this election, and 5 others in my caucus do, the majority changes to the other side, and the Representative Liebling, who described purchasing soup, will be the chair of the committee that I have right now. So she will have my job.
Wonderful.
So that's where we're at. That's the reality. That's a political reality. So there is, no, it's everybody's tired of politics, especially this time of year. But there's a reality to that. So that's what we need to do. We also need to stabilize the individual market so that people actually have choices that they had 10 years ago. The prices that hospitals and doctors charged went up 5% last year. Insurance in the individual market has gone up 67%. And you can't even buy policies that you used to be able to buy. So clearly something is wrong here that we need to pull out and get back to. So we need to change our relationship with MNsure, and we need to change our relationship with the federal government. That's going to take a longer view, but we've got to start getting real about it.
So back to that question, Ann, Obamacare basically puts all of these requirements on the states around this, through which we're limited in how much we can navigate around, basically mandates to us about this. So that's the most limiting thing. And then within there, if we continue on the same path we are federally, we will have limited ability, although some, to try to rediscover some of those free market forces that were destroyed here 3-4 years ago. Teresa.
I came back late from the cities and I didn't have much time to fall back and regroup before I came to this meeting. And I was late because my husband, who is not political, read the article in the Star Tribune all about MNsure that was in the paper. Either it was today or yesterday. And we're sitting on a powder because if my husband could get all wound up about MNsure, there's no telling what could happen. Chris, see you. Chris would be great.
I'll bring the mic over.
Most of you are talking about insurance, but what about the cost drivers? You mentioned mail being more expensive down in southeast Minnesota. Are the providers being asked to participate in bringing the cost down?
Yeah, there's, if you look at the overall fees and just the overall cost in terms of the marketplace, drugs is about 10% of the overall cost of healthcare. Doctors' services is 5%. Most of it is direct care and administration and overhead and all of that other stuff. Certainly, as technology grows, we are going to be able to do more stuff and it's more expensive, but it also can save money too. So, for example, the hepatitis C medicines that are very, very expensive prevent transplants because you can essentially cure what a few years ago meant an automatic transplant. We can now basically cure with an expensive drug. So there are cost drivers certainly, but the biggest cost driver is mandates and government overreach in the system and pulling choice away from doctors and hospitals and people, with who they want to go to and what they want to do. The more that choice gets pulled away, costs are going up, they're not going down. That the Obamacare was supposed to save $1 trillion immediately by the deals cut between the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies, and the doctors and the hospitals. And nobody believes that this is going to save money anymore. They all know it's going to cost more. The people who are accessing care through the emergency rooms are still accessing care through the emergency rooms. They're now just accessing it more. So we have to look at access and how we are using the system. as well to bring down those costs. And you got to have people, if people have skin in the game, they're going to utilize it smarter. If they have to pay $1, they're going to think about care differently. But if you have more than half of the state paying nothing and a smaller segment paying everything, and they're not even accessing care. So my wife sees people that she needs to operate on, and she says, you need a CT scan or you need an MRI. And they say, well, I can't, doctor, why don't we wait until January because I got to go in the next year because I just can't afford it right now. So they're putting off care that says, do I need surgery? Do I not need surgery because of their deductibles, when that's maybe going to be the difference between having surgery and not having surgery next year. So there's a lot of factors that go into that as well. But driving up the deductibles for people is not going to lower the overall cost.
Some economic truths in there called the tragedy of the commons, when you have a situation where people don't have a skin in the game. You might want to Google when you get home, tragedy of the commons. And that means if you don't have skin in the game, you end up with unlimited consumption and eventually rationing.
Or you could just go to a wedding with a open bar, and then go to a wedding with a cash bar, and see the alcohol consumption here.
My question is, the thrust of Obamacare was that no one could get turned away from obtaining coverage. But in southeastern Minnesota, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the insurance companies are saying they're not going to sell us insurance down here. The couple that are left are increasing. Ours is going up 51% next year. Why are these companies allowed to offer it to other parts of Minnesota and not down here and continue to do business in Minnesota?
That's a great question. There's a concept called statewide, meaning that if you're poor, you have to be able to get care anywhere in the state if you're on Medicaid. But if you're buying a private health insurance policy, the carriers can choose which counties they want to participate in and which they don't. So that's an unfair thing that we need to figure out. But you point out that what about the people who used to have, you had cancer or something that made you uninsurable? We had a program called MSHA in the state of Minnesota where we had a high-risk insurance pool that anybody could buy into. It was more expensive, and the cost of that was spread across the whole state. So people did have to pay more. It wasn't perfect, but they could get insurance. That's now gone, and all those folks are in the pool of the individual health insurance, and that's really skyrocketing the rates. So that you have to, you'd say, well, what we used to, just deny people coverage. We did not deny anyone coverage in the state of Minnesota because of that pool. They also said, well, now we can be on our appearance health insurance policies until we're 26. You know what it used to be in Minnesota? 25. So that's how far, that's the benefit in Minnesota. So it's another area where we were doing pretty well on our own before. A lot better, actually.
Thank you, gentlemen. I read just recently, and I hope I've got it straight, that if you signed up for MNsure and you were on the poverty level and you signed a lien, that your property could be subject to confiscation by some level of government. Did I read that right?
Yes.
Arg.
So if you went on the MNsure website, what you do is you put in all your information, this is how much money I make, and you go down to the bottom and check the boxes, and it would enroll you. Well, it enrolled a lot of people in Medicaid who didn't want to be on Medicaid. They had assets like farms and houses and things like that. And when they got onto Medicaid, they started getting liens from the state that said, all of your medical costs are now going to be billed back to you after you die. So a farmer who wants to give his farm to his kids is going to the doctor or not going to the doctor, and every month his farm is being billed $2,000, $3,000 a month that he has to pay when he dies. So we were able to get that cut out of the bill so that is not going to be applied to you. So if you have gotten those, or if you talk to the county and you hear about that, you might have to iron that out. But people had no idea that they were signing up for Medicaid, much less that they were going to get a lien placed against their farm. So that's just another side injury to thousands and thousands and thousands of Minnesotans that got the bad news that they were put on this program that they didn't want, didn't like, and now they had liens against their farms and property.
So Representative Dean, I stand corrected because I was in another meeting a week ago and somebody asked, where are all the good things that happened this last session? I can only come up with one, and it was the repeal of the income tax on veterans' pensions. So we have two. We have that one went through your committee and fixed that problem as well. So the list is growing. Someone else was up first over here, or I'm going to go to Barb now.
I just got a letter from the insurer, and in that letter, it stated something about going on to one of the policies if you're less than by $30,000. And on that one, it stated right in it that this will go against your estate when you die, that you have to pay it back. So I don't know if this is a different program. It's medical assistance, I think they said.
If it's medical assistance for a hospital like a nursing home, that would apply, and that always has applied. So that's not any different. But what this did is this put a whole category of people with assets in that same boat, so that their estate were being billed for their everyday medical care, or their monthly premium just went right against their farm right off the top. That should be corrected if it's not for nursing home care. If it's for health care, that should be done.
Well, instead of making it income-based, why not make it asset-based? And if you got someone who has a lot of assets and they qualify for an MA, why not make it income-based then?
We've had asset tests in the past. We need to have asset tests because if you can show that you have low or no income, you can still have millions of dollars of assets. Right. And you shouldn't be on Medicaid. You should be buying a policy with your assets. So that's part of the rationale for an asset test that we think we should have. Right. There currently isn't an asset test. I had in my bill to reinstate the asset test for Medicaid so that you wouldn't have millionaires on Medicaid and middle-class people getting the tar kicked out of them. So that's something that I think we need to do moving forward.
Is there a grievance process if you have a grievance against Hampshire?
Yes, there is. There's an appeal and a grievance process.
I'd like to get some information on that. I've got a young man who wants to file a grievance against.
Sure. Just email me.
We'll get you one of these sheets over here. Merle's got a sheet.
Yep. No question. Happy to follow up.
I believe it was Mr. Drazkowski who called this middle class bankruptcy insurance. Was it you? Or you? Okay. With all due respect, I know it takes government a long time to get things done. What are we looking at time-wise to get something positive done before this indeed does bankrupt all of us?
I don't think we can wait through 2017 to change stuff, because the plan that was certified should never have been certified. It does not work. It hurts people. So we're going to have to look at trying to get people relief of some kind in the year 2017, either through a lame duck session or through something in the regular session that can help people at least pay for insurance and try to get covered. And so it might be helping the hospitals and doctors to be able to provide coverage. It might be helping people buy policies, and it might be being able to sell different products over the top of the existing market. And one of the questions, or one of the suggestions that they have made to us is that we say, if people want to just go without health insurance, let's pay the fine for them. So if you want to go without, we'll pay your fine, and then if you go to the hospital, you get in trouble, whatever. So that proposal on the table says, the government says, go ahead and break the law and we'll pay the penalty for you. We'll pay the ticket. What about if we said, maybe the state should break the law and stop complying with all these idiotic rules that the federal government makes us do? And maybe we put some skin in the game, and if somebody has to break the law, maybe it should be us. So, maybe, because middle-class Minnesota can't do it, can't make it through the year. So,
other questions?
I heard this information at least 5 months ago that I was going to be down to one provider. Why was it sat on until now?
Yeah, the question is, why is this coming out in October instead of May? Because the insurance folks tend to look out into the future and forecast things for a living. And when those dates became public, the Commerce Commissioner delayed the announcement dates to October because they were very concerned about this thing coming out. And I don't know if it was because they were worried they weren't going to get insurance products certified, or if it was because it was right before an election. I don't know what the motivation was, and I can't describe that because I'm not there and I don't know. But I can tell you it's not fair, and it doesn't give us enough time to react. And the people, if it was for political reasons, they are dumb politically, because this is not helpful for anybody to put this on middle-class Minnesota. So if it was done for another reason, I can't think of that either. So there's really not a good reason for the delay, and they should not have kept Minnesota in the dark on what the rates were going to be and what the offerings were going to be until the last second. And here it is, take it or leave it. And the disparities between people on public programs and people trying to pay premiums is unbelievable. And the insurance companies have said, for Medica, they've said you have to sign up through MNsure. And if you had an insurance agent, you might call them up or you might not, but we're not going to pay any, what do you call it? Commissions. We're not going to pay any commissions to the insurance agents, none. So you're going to just work for free. Because everybody has to go through the website now, right? And we've got more business than we want. Think about that. The insurance companies cap the number of people who write checks and pay, and they don't cap the number of people who don't pay. In just a very short period of years, that flipped around. So that's where we're at. Crazy.
So Matt, while I'm looking for the next question, could you characterize quickly, so if I am an MA recipient and going through MNsure through the public program, what kind of policy do I get?
You get, folks on Medicaid get a very high actuarial product. The benefits are very broad. They're comprehensive. They include dental, they include mental health coverage, they include chemical and behavioral health coverage. So it's very comprehensive, which is good, but it's very expensive. And they're accessible. So you can present at any facility in the state, and if you go to the emergency room of any hospital, you'll receive treatment at that hospital. If you're on Medicaid, you will have no bill, essentially.
Okay, sorry. I just had a question. So the way I see it, and maybe I'm wrong, but it sounds like we almost need an emergency solution, right? And then something more long-term in coming years. Obviously, it's been going on for many, many years, well over 10 years. I know my mom used to run her own business and quit over 10 years ago to go back to work so she could get health insurance, because at that point it was even too expensive. And I guess my question is there even ever going to be the possibility of privatizing healthcare again? I mean, we've seen company after company leave Minnesota, so there's hardly anybody left even to cover anybody if we're not on the state program. And then maybe a second part to that question is there ever going to be the possibility that healthcare is no longer tied to employment, or will it always be tied to employment? So people as farmers, small business owners, or business owners in general, are kind of stuck on that small 5%, right, where they're the ones put on the hook.
Well, I think businesses by and large want to provide health insurance for their employees if they can, because it's a good benefit to attract and retain good employees. And as an employer myself who bought insurance for my employees, it's something that you feel is your responsibility to do and you want to do. But you can't have small businesses that can't have unaffordable costs. So there is a very strong desire for many to move the insurance deductibility from the corporate side to the individual, so that you could deduct the cost of your own private health insurance and take that with you from company to company if you work for a small company. That's a proposal that some folks think is a good idea, and that's one that has a lot of wind in its sails, I think. But if we want to be able to get insurance companies back into Minnesota and to write, we have to take some of the shackles off the top. If we scoop up another 250,000 people and put them onto Minnesota Care with lower reimbursement rates and higher benefits across the board, this thing is going to break pretty quick. So I think the next 2 years could be very important. The individual market in Minnesota right now is basically melted down. The plan that is currently on the table doesn't work. If the carriers, let's say we lost Blue Cross Blue Shield, the biggest carrier, we lost Preferred One, the smallest carrier. If we lose another one, the market in Minnesota is not, we're just not going to have an individual market in 2018. So we need to step in to be able to provide some footing so that insurance policies can be written. So we got to be able to get rid of some mandates, and we have to be able to offer more products and more incentives for people to buy insurance. And we can't pretend gravity doesn't exist, and that we can continue to just spend more money on public programs, and it's going to work.
What shackles were you talking about?
Well, just a second, he's got a question here.
I was just wondering, how could you do this in 1 week? I mean, Governor Dayton wants a special session next week. I was just wondering how that would be possible to get that done in 1 week.
I think Governor Dayton today said that it has to be after the election. So, yeah, it'll be after the election. So, from that standpoint, lame duck sessions will be between November 9th and January 9th. It will probably be in the month of November. But I would hope that it would be very extremely limited, because between now and then, the voters in Minnesota are going to weigh in on a lot of things, and healthcare is one of them. I think we need to take that into consideration, and the next legislature should set the budget for transportation and bonding and all of those things. We shouldn't have people who are going to be unelected very soon making those long-term decisions.
To kind of add to her question, what are some of the shackles you're talking about that take off that would bring the more carriers into the market?
Right, to be able to offer more products in the state of Minnesota, we have more mandates than I think all but 3 other states. So we have to be able to say that Minnesota is going to lower some of those mandates put on at the state level, much less at the federal Obamacare level. So we have to be able to say that we're not going to provide every coverage for every person across the board. My legislative assistant is 25 years old, and he's healthy as a horse. He won't be going to the doctor for 5 years unless he hurts himself doing something. He needs to be part of the system and to be able to buy a product with high risk, because he's not going to get sick. He's as healthy as a horse. So he needs to be part of the process, but he shouldn't have to buy comprehensive care for everything. He should be able to buy something with very high risk, because his chances are low. And that will bring down the cost, and it will be able to allow middle-class people to afford health insurance again.
So for instance, we got 65 state mandates, Matt, or 66 or something? Oh, it's over 70. It was 62 like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. So we just keep adding more mandates, including my favorite one. If you're an 80-year-old woman or a 22-year-old man, You get to pay for pregnancy coverage.
That's
true. Yes. Okay, in favor?
I don't need them. You might. We have
To go back to the gentleman's earlier question about why Minnesota Care versus Obamacare, part of that was the states that did their own were supposed to get a subsidy, correct? And if that's the case, why can't we to back up after that, I guess, the Supreme Court ruled that all of the states were going to get the subsidy, correct? So why can't we, in the new legislature, just say Medicare is dead, and at least as a Band-Aid fix, just everybody go to Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act?
Right. The Supreme, thank you for bringing that up. I meant to touch on that earlier. One of the attractions to the state-based exchange was that we would have a state bump for our tax breaks. They'd say, hey, if you do this, if you jump in, you're going to get a tax benefit for your state. It'll be awesome. So we said, hey, we want that, we want to get it. Then all the other states got the same benefit. So then we said, well, we're chumps. Why do we have this awful thing, and everyone else gets the benefit too? We're a chump state. And so that's one of the things that we want to do. It makes no financial, it takes away that tax benefit for getting in. But also, they said you're going to get billions of dollars more for your hospitals because you get higher reimbursement rates over time. And they were that made it was like more sugar out there for you to come into this thing. And those benefits really have not strengthened our safety net system, and they've actually made it worse in greater Minnesota. So the benefits for jumping in have not materialized.
Okay, folks, we're about to wrap up here, but we've got Barb Haley and Mike Goggin here, and they've been knocking on lots and lots of doors. So if we could quickly, Barb and Mike, if you guys could come up here and just say a little bit about what you've been seeing or hearing, or certainly introduce yourself, and thank you both for running all the hard work you've been doing.
Thank you for being here, Representative Dean. Thanks, Steve. I have been knocking on a lot of doors. Hopefully I've met most of you in the room. And if I haven't yet, I'd like to shake your hand tonight. When I decided to run, the issue of healthcare was one of the first things I put on my platform, because we could all see this coming. And I've talked to many people about it, and it's story after story after story, like what you've all said tonight. So I'm committed to tackle it. I have a little bit of experience. I served on the hospital board here when the ACA model was being negotiated in Washington, D.C., and we were trying to figure out how we were going to maintain quality health care right here in Red Wing. So I've been around the block a little bit, and I've fought to maintain quality care at a reasonable price here in Red Wing before, and I'll do that again if elected. So big challenges ahead, but I think we're up to the task, and as you mentioned, it's going to depend on what the voters do in a couple 10 days. Are we down to 10 days? We're down to 10 days. 12. That's it. That's the end of here. So here you go, Mike.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. Again, thanks to Representative Drazkowski and Dean. I'm going to get away from the things that's briefer. As Barb said, we're knocking doors, and the first thing we hear is health care. What are we going to do about health care? I got a phone call at 7:32 last night, and a gentleman was very upset. In 2015, he was paying $13,000 for he and his wife for their premium, and about $3,400 for their deductible. They can't afford to go without insurance because she's a 5-time breast cancer survivor. So this year, they got a nice little surprise. It's now $27,570, I think he said. It's over $27,000 with the $3,400 deductible. They have to pay it, but it's crippling them. I mean, how are we going to get through all this? I knocked on a few doors a couple weeks ago, and I ran into a young family, a wife and husband and 3 kids, and they're not doing the insurance, and what they're doing is they're going to try to eat healthy, get lots of rest, get water, go that route, because they flat can't afford the $1,800 a month premium that they were now going to have to pay versus the $900 or $800 they had the year before. And before that it was $400, so it just kept, it's doubling every time every year goes by. And so we need to work on that, and we need to get people up there like Barb and I and Representative Dean and Drazkowski so that we can actually do common sense solutions up there. I'm an engineer, I'm a project manager out at the nuclear power plant. I do this all day long. I figure out problems, I solve problems, I figure out a plan, and I implement the plan. And we need to do that with this. I mean, we got to put partisanship aside, and we have to work together to solve this issue because it's hurting our people, our businesses, our economy, and we can't sustain this. As Governor Dayton said, it's the Unaffordable Care Act. You know, we have to get this under control. So, as said earlier, November 8th is a big day, 12 days from now, and it's going to be a game changer for us. And we need to get the right people in office that can go up there and fix this. Because you don't go back to the same doctor that screwed up your surgery to go ahead and redo it again. You go find another doctor. Right now, we need to fix that. And by doing that, we need you to vote on November 8th for the 4 of us up here. Thank you very much.
Okay, two things. If anyone else has any other questions that they would like Representative Dean and I to follow up on, Merle still has some more of those sheets.
They're around here somewhere.
They should be.
On the counter, right?
Okay, they're on the counter over here by the coffee. So go by the coffee if you'd like us, if you've got anything you'd like us to follow up on, and we will. A quick announcement here. There is a rally at our state capitol Lower Mall on Saturday, November 5th from 1 to 3 p.m. And the event name is Urgent Call to Stop Minnesota Health Insurance Rate Hikes and Revise or Repeal the ACA. That is Saturday, November 5th from 1 to 3 p.m. With that, I think we're about ready to adjourn. An announcement here.
I'd just like to make one, I know you guys didn't want to get into the political realm too much, but one comment that I'll make is that Minnesota has been pretty influential in this whole mess because what for a few hundred overturned votes in 2008, we wouldn't have that. But it all comes down to the Al Franken, and that took the voice away from the Republican Party in Washington. And there was nothing that could be done to stop this, and that's what we've got to show for it. So, what matters, it really does.
It does. And did you hear Representative Dean mention earlier that MNsure has been sending out voter registration cards through MNsure when they aren't doing their job properly. Representative Dean has a quick comment, then we're ready to adjourn.
Yep. Just quickly about that, I remember going to my church right after the election with Franken and Coleman, and we were passing in cards. I'm Catholic, and it was a pro-life issue, and we were passing postcards, and we were going to pass one to both U.S. senators. We could only pass one in because the other one was in doubt yet because we were doing a recount. And I knew people in that church that didn't want to vote for Norm Coleman because they didn't like the vote on the TARP bailout. I bet you they wish they could have that vote back because that was the 60th vote and that was Obamacare. But one of the things that I just want to point your attention is the little cards that I have out for stopping MNsure. Please fill those out and mail them in to me. If you want to grab a few more and bring them home and pass them around and mail them back, that's great. I get them every day. I get envelopes full of them every day. And the goal is to get more people to sign up to kill MNsure than sign up for MNsure. And I'm really close. So if we can get that over the top, that'll be an important message to Governor Dayton that we really do actually need to move ahead and get rid of these things. So I would greatly appreciate that.
They've already filled them out. We have a bag right here. You can drop them in and save yourself a stamp.
Put them in the right bag and save yourself a stamp.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks. Merle, do you want to close it up? We're good? Okay. Thank you. Have a good night.